It started with a song, just 4 notes from the Roots keyboard. And suddenly the brightest smile in late-night television froze mid-laugh. The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, was in full swing. That Tuesday evening, Nicole Kidman sat across from Jimmy's desk, radiant in a cream-colored dress, promoting her latest film. The interview had been flowing perfectly. Stories about filming in Australia, laughs about working with difficult co-stars. The usual charming banter that made Jimmy's show feel like a conversation between old friends. Questlove had just started playing a soft jazz melody during a commercial break. Something smooth and nostalgic that often filled the gaps between segments. But as those opening notes of The Way You Look Tonight drifted across Studio 6B, something shifted in Nicole's expression. Her smile didn't fade gradually, it simply vanished, as if someone had turned off a light switch behind her eyes. She stared past Jimmy, past the cameras, past the studio audience of 240 people, into a place only she could see. Jimmy noticed immediately. 15 years of hosting had taught him to read people, to catch the moments when laughter turned into something else entirely. He'd seen actors break character, politicians dodge questions, and musicians forget lyrics. But this was different. This wasn't professional nerves or stage fright. This was grief, raw and sudden, surfacing without warning. "Nicole." Jimmy's voice was gentle, concerned. The cameras kept rolling, but his attention was completely focused on his guest. "You okay?" Nicole blinked, as if waking from a dream. She looked down at her hands, then back at Jimmy, and he could see tears beginning to form in her eyes. The studio fell quiet, except for that soft melody still playing from the Roots corner. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her Australian accent thicker when she was emotional. "It's just that song." Behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He raised his hand toward Questlove, a signal to stop the music. The melody cut off mid-note, leaving only the hum of studio lights and the collective, held breath of an audience that sensed they were witnessing something unplanned. Something real. "Talk to me," Jimmy said, abandoning his desk entirely. He walked around to the guest area and sat on the edge of the coffee table, directly in front of Nicole. In that moment, he wasn't Jimmy Fallon the host. He was Jimmy Fallon the person, someone who understood that some moments were bigger than television. Nicole's composure began to crack. "My father," she said, her voice barely audible. "He used to dance with me to that song. Every Sunday after dinner he'd put on his old Sinatra records, and he'd bow like a proper gentleman and ask for a dance." The studio was absolutely silent now. Even the cameramen had stopped moving, instinctively understanding that they were capturing something precious and fragile. "I was probably 6 when it started," Nicole continued, the words coming faster now, as if a dam had burst. "He'd lift me up so I could stand on his feet, and we'd sway around our tiny living room in Sydney. He'd sing along, completely off-key, and tell me I was the most beautiful dancer in the world." Jimmy leaned forward, his own eyes beginning to glisten. In the control room, producers debated whether to cut a commercial, but something about the moment felt too important to interrupt. "The tradition continued, even when I got older," Nicole said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Through my teenage years, when I thought dancing with my dad was embarrassing. Through my 20s, when I was traveling constantly for work, every time I came home, Sunday dinner and then our dance." She paused, struggling with the words that came next. "He was diagnosed with prostate cancer when I was 34. The treatments were brutal, but he never missed our Sunday dinners. Even when he was weak, even when he could barely stand, he'd still ask me to dance. But the last time I saw him," her voice broke completely. Jimmy reached over and gently took her hand, a gesture so natural and compassionate that the entire studio seemed to exhale collectively. "He was in hospice," Nicole whispered, "too weak to get out of bed. I flew back from filming and I sat with him for 3 days. He kept saying he was sorry he couldn't dance with me anymore. He kept apologizing for not being strong enough to give me one last dance. The cameras continued rolling, but everyone in Studio 6B understood they were no longer making television. They were witnessing a daughter's love, a father's devotion, and the kind of regret that lives in the spaces between what we planned to do and what we actually did. I told him it was okay, Nicole continued. I told him we'd dance again when he felt better, but we both knew that wasn't true. He died 2 days later, and I never got to dance with him one more time. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of recognition, of shared understanding, of the universal experience of love interrupted by loss. Jimmy stood up slowly. The entire studio watched as he walked to Nicole's chair, and with the gentleness of someone who understood heartbreak, extended his hand to her. "Nicole," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "would you dance with me?" What happened next wasn't planned by any producer, wasn't written in any script, wasn't designed for ratings or viral moments. It was simply one human being offering comfort to another in the only way that made sense. Nicole looked up at Jimmy, tears streaming down her face, and nodded. Jimmy helped her stand, and as Questlove, without being asked, began playing The Way You Look Tonight again. Jimmy Fallon and Nicole Kidman began to dance, not the polished choreography of a planned segment, but the gentle swaying of two people, honoring a memory, healing a wound, completing something that had been left unfinished. The studio audience rose to their feet, not in applause, but in reverence. Some were crying openly, others had their hands over their hearts. All of them understood they were witnessing something sacred. As they danced, Jimmy whispered something in Nicole's ear that the microphones didn't pick up, but whatever he said made her smile through her tears. The first genuine smile she'd shown since that music began. When the song ended, they stood there for a moment longer, and Nicole whispered, "Thank you." He would have loved that. The episode aired exactly as it happened, with no editing to remove the raw emotion, or the unprecedented moment when a talk show became a memorial, a dance floor, a place where healing happened live on television. In the weeks that followed, the show received thousands of letters from viewers, sharing their own stories of dances never taken, words never spoken, moments never completed. The segment became known simply as The Dance, and it reminded everyone who saw it that sometimes the most powerful performances happen when the performance stops and humanity takes over. Nicole later said it was the most meaningful television appearance of her career, not because of the promotion or the laughs, but because a kind man in a borrowed moment gave her the last dance her father never could. What viewers didn't see was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. As the studio audience filed out, many stopping to wipe their eyes, Jimmy and Nicole remained on the stage. She was still wearing his suit jacket. He had draped it over her shoulders during their dance, a gesture so natural that neither of them had even noticed. "You know," Jimmy said quietly, his voice still carrying the weight of the moment, "my dad and I never had that either. A proper goodbye." Nicole looked at him with surprise. Jimmy Fallon, the man who seemed to have endless joy, who made millions laugh every night, carried his own unfinished story. "He had a heart attack when I was 26, Jimmy continued. "I was doing SNL, working crazy hours, always telling myself I'd visit more, call more, spend more time. But there was always another show, another opportunity, another reason to wait." The production crew worked quietly around them, dismantling equipment, but giving the two stars space for this unexpected conversation. "The last time I saw him," Jimmy said, "he was so proud of me being on SNL. He kept telling everyone at the hospital that his son was on television. I promised him I'd come back the next weekend to watch a game with him, but I got caught up in work, and then..." Nicole placed her hand on Jimmy's arm. "He knew," she said simply. "They always know how much we love them, even when we don't say it enough." Jimmy smiled through his own tears. "That's what your dad was trying to tell you too, wasn't he? Through that song, through all those Sunday dances." He was saying goodbye every time, just in case. The conversation was interrupted by Questlove, approaching them. The usually quiet band leader had tears in his eyes. "Jimmy, Nicole," he said softly. "My grandmother passed last month. She raised me, you know? And she used to play piano while I played drums. Just the two of us in her living room. What you just did up there. Man, it reminded me that music isn't just sound. It's love made audible." The three of them stood there for a moment, united by the understanding that loss is universal, but so is the capacity to heal each other through simple acts of kindness. Over the following weeks, the impact of that single moment rippled outward in ways none of them could have predicted. The video clip was viewed over 50 million times, but more importantly, it sparked something deeper. Funeral homes reported an increase in families requesting specific songs for services. Dance studios saw older clients coming in, wanting to learn dances they could share with their children. Hospices around the country began incorporating music and movement therapy into their programs. Jimmy received a letter from an 82-year-old man in Ohio, who wrote, "I watched your show with my daughter that night. We hadn't spoken in 3 years after a stupid argument. The next morning I called her and asked if she wanted to come over and listen to her mother's old record. We danced in my living room for the first time since she was 7 years old. Thank you for reminding us what matters." Nicole framed a photo from that night, not a professional publicity shot, but a candid image captured by a staff photographer. In it, she and Jimmy are mid-dance, both crying, both smiling, both completely present in a moment that transcended entertainment. She keeps it in her dressing room now, a reminder that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bridge that connects us all. The segment became required viewing in grief counseling programs, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. It showed that healing doesn't always come through talking or therapy or time. Sometimes it comes through a stranger's kindness, a shared song, and the courage to let someone else hold your pain for just a moment. Jimmy still plays The Way You Look Tonight during commercial breaks sometimes. When he does, crew members notice him pause for just a second, as if he's listening for something beyond the melody. He's thinking about his father, about Nicole's father, about all the dances we never take, and all the words we never say. But mostly he's thinking about how one unplanned moment taught him that the best television happens when you stop trying to make television and start trying to make connections. That night, Studio 6B became more than a stage. It became a sanctuary where two people honored their father's memories and reminded a watching world that love is stronger than loss, that music can heal what words cannot touch, and that sometimes, just sometimes, we do get second chances to say goodbye the right way.